Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I am Andrew Musgrove, joined by John Gibson for part two of our season review. Aaron covered part one earlier in the week, and Gibbo will now look back on the period between January and the end of March and the little matter of a Carabao Cup win might crop up. Thank you, as always, to NordVPN for sponsoring the show. You can click on the link in the podcast description box to take advantage of a very exclusive offer and get yourself a plan to protect yourself. There's no risk with a 30-day money-back guarantee. John, welcome back to the show. How are you keeping? Are you well?
I am very, very well after the season we've had. I'm looking forward to the summer of activity in the transfer market, and off we go again with all the big games. Where Europe, Champions League, and the Sunderland derbies. I mean, a lot to look forward to, a lot to look back at.
It certainly is. Talk to me before we get into your section of the review. Talk to me about the last day of the season up at St James's Park, Newcastle versus Everton. They lost 1-0, but still managed to qualify for the Champions League thanks to Manchester United doing them a favour. Just talk to me about your emotions throughout the afternoon and then when
Oh,
you heard that final whistle, John.
absolutely incredible. I mean, I was sitting between Craig Hope on the Daily Mail and a lad who's Phil Nulty, who I've known for years, who's a BBC national number one writer. I used to cover the World Cups with him. And he's, as it happens, he's an Everton fan. So, and he said he introduced himself to me that afternoon. Hello, my old mate. I come bearing gifts, 3 points to get you into the Champions League, etc., etc. And it didn't turn out like that at all. And in the second half, we just spent the whole second half as much watching the results of the other teams as we did watching the game, because it was obviously not in our hands anymore the way we were playing, and we were worn down. And while I'm grateful to Manchester United, and I never thought I would say that in my lifetime, because I've never been grateful to Manchester United from the days when they nicked the title off Way twice in the 90s when we finished second to them, right away through to the Eddie's first Carabo Cup final when they beat us, and even last season when they beat Man City in the FA Cup final and nicked our last European place. We could have been in Europe this season. So I never thought I'd be grateful to them, but I was. And to Martinez for getting himself sent off, and to the blunder ref for taking out an Aston Villa goal. But you know what? I'm sick of being grateful for all that. That was just what happened for an hour and a half on the last day. Over the full programme of 38 games plus the Carabao Cup, we deserved everything we got. I mean, only the game before the last game of the season, we were playing Arsenal for the team that finished second in the league and narrowly lost 1-0 when we battered them in the first half. So, we are grateful, but let us stop being grateful. We deserved what we got over the full season, over the 38 match haul. We deserved what we got, and we won the Carabao Cup in sensational form. So, my gratitude is, which I felt during the whole afternoon, Andrew, and no doubt you did, is very much put to one side now. I'm sorry, I'm done with being grateful. Let's give our boys the credit for doing what they did. Yes, they almost tripped over the last hurdle. It was almost one game too many for them, and it was a bewildering performance. But let's forget that and look at the plus. And the plus is we finished fifth, we're in the Champions League, and we've got our first domestic pot in 70 years. That'll do for me.
And me, and I assume all of our viewers and listeners as well. Let's go back to January then, John, and we'll start and quickly move on from the transfer window. Another month without signing, even though it was desperately needed. There were some key exits, and we'll talk about those in a brief moment. But in terms of incomings, John, how did you feel about another barren window?
Oh, absolutely frustrated. But I've been frustrated for three windows now. And that's why I'm looking forward to the summer. Paul Mitchell going looked on the surface like, oh dear me, we've got the main man going, but quite frankly, his relationship with Eddie was never the best from day one onwards. And it only moves Eddie centre stage, and I think that's a good thing. So I'm not at all apprehensive about the timing of him going. And it was going to be a battle of wills, and he won it. That window was awful. I mean, one of the real pluses we've got to give the squad and Eddie this season is that the wish list we went into at the start of the season and had again in January, which is a goalkeeper, a right-sided centre half, an outside right, and a cover centre forward. We've got the same wish list going into the summer now. So in other words, the team and Eddie got no help either pre-season a year ago or in January, and still achieved what they achieved. At times we were flying by the seat of our pants because of the lack of numbers. And that was absolutely frustrating in January, but inevitable. I wasn't expecting, I was hoping, but not expecting for anything in January, and we didn't get it. By the way, that feeling goes out the window now. It is a must that we sign people this summer.
I'm certain they will do. But I remember predicting in the build up to the January transfer window opening, and I said on this very podcast, I don't think they're going to sign anybody. My gut instinct says to me they're going to bring absolutely nobody in, despite the fact there were plenty of rumours. Cunha was linked, of course, Gay was linked again. Semenyo, kind of the same players who are being linked now. Obviously, Cunha's gone off to Manchester United, but I just felt that Newcastle United weren't going to push themselves to sign anybody, then risk having to go through the whole rigmarole of what they went through last June in terms of scrapping around to sell a big name to cover themselves. I thought they were always going to just gamble, and it was a gamble. It's paid off, but I thought they were always going to gamble, hopefully get into the Champions League, and then help Eddie Howe with some additions this summer, which is what is going to happen. We did say,
The
John, goodbye.
things, sorry, Andrew, sorry, mate. The interesting thing about the transfer window, which I can't, in a way, get my head round, and I believe what you said there to be utterly correct. And there was all this, oh, well, we're hamstrung by financial fair play, etc., etc. We're then at risk in Elliot Anderson in Minter situation again. Yet we spent the whole of the window trying to buy Gay. And now, we was there 65 million available for him? Well, we made a 65 million offer, so there must have been. And then we kept our powder dry. But I always got the feeling with that transfer, it was going on too long. We could have closed it and done it much earlier on if we'd been front foot about it and not pussyfoot around the fee. Um, it almost looked half-hearted to me throughout the campaign, but we were in from and big money.
I think with that, as Aaron Stokes explained in the first part of the review, was that if they'd signed Gay that summer, then someone would have had to have left probably before June the 30th this year to cover themselves in terms of the fee and PSR. So it was one of those where you have to weigh up the balance, and thankfully the gamble has paid off. We did, though, John, say goodbye to Miguel Almiron after 5 years at the club. The Miguel Almiron fan club had already closed down following a despicable dive against Brighton many a moon ago. He was a great servant, always gave us all, probably left a lot of people frustrated that he never really, other than that purple patch a couple of years back, found the net often enough. But we waved him away with our best wishes. I think with me, John, the thing that stood out was that it didn't half drag on, this Almiron
Yeah,
going. It seemed to last an eternity before he was actually signed by the MLS club that he obviously left to join Newcastle in the first place.
yeah, a big smile left the city because he always had a smile on his face. I know at one stage you were absolutely in love with him, you adored him, and you were the cheerleader in his fan club. Um, but I was always a little bit more cynical and felt that perhaps I oughtn't to have been, and I disgusted you at times by being cynical. But I thought he was I thought, you know what I thought? He was exactly what he was. He was a brick in the wall. He was the type of player you need to get to a certain level, then you've got to jettison it. And good managers do that. And Newcastle did that successfully during the entertainers when they had bricks in the wall from Killer Kilcline and then moved on to somebody better. They had David Kelly, who scored goals for fun in the second division, the championship. But the minute Keegan got wind of the big lead, he was jettisoned, Kelly, and this was the case with Almiron. I thought that Eddie and the powers that be give him a little bit too long. They could have got rid earlier. His sell-by date had gone. It's the same situation now with Callum Wilson. You waited and waited and waited for the Miggy Almiron exit to go because we've got to be active in getting rid as well as buying to allow us to buy. And I think Callum Wilson has just been another reflection of the Miggy Almiron thing. But yes, he went with my best wishes. He did great for us. He was never upset the apple cart. Terrific in the dressing room. Good on the pitch for a short while. A building brick. Thank you very much. You were terrific.
And we also said goodbye to Lloyd Kelly, who was here very briefly. He really let me down, did Lloyd, because I went on the record and said, I think this could be one of the best free transfers the Premier League has ever seen. And I meant it at the time. I thought it was a brilliant bit of business by Newcastle United. But my goodness me, he just did not show us what he can do, what he's capable of. I think he's a very talented footballer in there, but it just didn't work out. And interestingly, John, we talk about Paul Mitchell leaving and the fact that he hasn't signed anybody, which he hasn't. He might do before he exits at the end of June. But assuming that he had a big part in Lloyd Kelly's exit to Juve on loan with an obligation to buy for a fee of around £20 million, you have to hand it to Paul Mitchell. That's his one and only deal for Newcastle United. It's not a bad one, given how bad Lloyd Kelly did in his first 6 months in Newcastle.
Well, I'm not going to hand him anything really because I was expecting a lot more from him. And if all he can do is get one player out, thanks very much. I will get a few in as well. It was, I will admit, and we don't know how much of the input is Mitchell, how much is. I mean, if you're going to give Mitchell credit for getting him out, are you going to nail Howe for bringing him in? Even though it was a free because it didn't work. It swings and roundabouts, isn't it? I mean, I was disappointed in Kelly as well. I was expecting more than we got. It's a wonderful sale. Presumably, Juventus saw the bloke that was at Bournemouth and not the bloke that was at Newcastle. He looked almost overawed at Newcastle, and by all intents and purposes, has looked equally overawed at Juve. But yes, I mean, he was almost Minter, wasn't he? He did play for Howe, whereas Minter didn't. But he was in and out in a flash, and almost, you'd say, "Where did we see him again? Who did he play again? And what was he like?" It was almost that quick and that fleeting that he's almost rubbed out of the record books. It was that quick, and I hope we don't make that sort of signing this summer. I want somebody that comes in to be impact and to take us to the next level and not be jettisoned pretty quick in January.
Yep, indeed. We'll move on to the football now then, John. Newcastle's great form continued. They beat Spurs and they beat Wolves with the small matter of the first leg of the Carabao Cup semi-final away to Arsenal in the middle of those two fixtures. We'll look at the semi-final now, John. The first leg on January the 7th. They won that 2-0, but had to wait until February to finish the tie-off, which was very annoying to wait that long. The first leg saw goals from Isak and Gordon. It was a superb performance, changing formation with three centre-backs, Sven Botman coming back in. And John, it was a bit like when your mum gets a special plates out for the big occasions, I thought. And it worked really, really well, didn't it, down at the Emirates?
Oh, I mean, a wonderful, stunning result. I mean, Arsenal at home, people think they're invincible. And this was the middle match of three wins against Arsenal. I know that we lost the second last match of the season, but we beat them three times. And to win at the Emirates 2-0, it was a tactical masterpiece from Eddie Howe, no question about that. We were terrific on the day. Really, when you look back, two things leap out at me with hindsight, which is a wonderful thing to have, as you know, Andrew. One is that Dubrovka was in goal for this. And by the way, we forget about Martin Dubrovka this season. Of course we do, because we've got so many heroes from Trippier through to both the young England fullbacks, to the midfield three, to Isak, to our wingers, etc., etc. But Dubrovka had to go in with an injury to Pope for a while, and he kept this show steady, and he kept it terrific, and he played down there. And I mean, he was in tears at the end of the game because he thought it was his might be his final farewell because he was going to go on to Saudi, etc., etc. So insane thank you to one or two people like Miggy for services rendered, to Callum Wilson perhaps now for services rendered. Thank you to Martin Dubrovka for what he did, not just in the past, but this season. He kept us afloat during that spell. And I felt that spell when we beat Arsenal home and away. And by Jove, that was some performance to do that, wasn't it? And by the way, in the three games at this stage, Andrew, with Arsenal, it played three, won three, scored five, let in none. I mean, what a record that was. But wasn't that also a time when Anthony Gordon was at his most dangerous? That was the Anthony Gordon that we loved. That was the Anthony Gordon that become an England regular. That was the Anthony Gordon that stopped Harvey Barnes getting a sniff, if the action really. That was him at his superlative best. Unfortunately, around the time of the League Cup final when he got sent off, and ever since, it hasn't been the Anthony Gordon we know, but that was him at his crucial best. He was scoring goals then and playing magnificently. I mean, my final thought on that first leg of the semi, Andrew, was, I mean, I know managers take liberties at times, but according to Arteta, they didn't lose because it was a master class from Eddie Howe, or because Isak scored goals like he always does, or Gordon was at his best, or even with Dubravka in goal. It was the shape of the ball. He complained about the ball, if you remember. The Carabo Cup balls were just not orthodox. They didn't do what everybody anticipated. I mean, give me a rest. Don't make me smile. I've got a split lip. I mean, you can do better than that, Miguel, surely.
Yeah, I think a lot of people remember that excuse, and he didn't half get reminded of it in the return tie back at St James's Park, which we'll talk about in a brief moment. But John, following that win at Arsenal, I know as well, I'm sure it led to some feisty discussions around your dinner table with your family ties to Arsenal. Did you allow yourself to dream after that first leg?
Oh, I did because it was a way and we'd done it, and it was so stunning. I thought, hey, we'd already beaten Forest and Chelsea in the League Cup, and now, unless we tripped up over our laces in the second leg, and the wait for the second leg was the only thing that bothered me. It was too long, and you're thinking, can we do it again? Picking it up weeks later. But I mean, you absolutely dream because before we kicked off there, Andrew, if you and I are truthful, and if 50,000 or 300,000 Geordies are truthful, it was damage limitation down there. If we can have damage limitation at the Emirates, we can beat them up here and still make the final. And it wasn't damage limitation whatsoever. It was front foot outsmarting Arteta and doing a terrific, terrific job. But I mean, I would have accepted it coming back home a goal down or whatever, because I remember when we reached our first League Cup final um, in '76, we went into the same area of London. We went to Spurs in the semi-final first leg and were a goal down and brought them up here and beat them up here in the second leg. And I was confident then because we're only a goal down. This was wonderful.
Have to say though that if I remember correctly, I did predict Newcastle to beat Arsenal at the Emirates because I believe, John, the moment that the draw was made, I booked me tickets. I was like, we are getting to this final, and I did predict, if my memory serves me correct, Newcastle winning that first leg. I was just overly confident for some reason. Hey, but it paid off. United, John, were brought down to earth with a bit of a bump after that game, losing 4-1 to Bournemouth at home. It result no one saw coming. Bournemouth were in great form. They were 9 unbeaten at that time, but Newcastle were looking for the 10th win in a row. But right from the word go, John, something just wasn't right. They were outplayed, they were outfought. An alarming result, an alarming performance. But context was needed, wasn't it? Because you had to really look back at the last 9 wins and say, do you know what? They've done tremendous. Look where we are. One leg in the League Cup final. We're in 4th. We could have gone ahead of City had we won that game. I think a lot of people underestimated Bournemouth. I think a lot of people neglected actually the run they'd been on, the talent players they've got. It needed context, I think, that result and performance, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we, as you'd mentioned earlier, we'd beaten Wolves at home 3-0 after the Arsenal semi-final. Again, Isaac Two and Gordon, the same guys, scored that scored at Arsenal. The thing that I thought from the Wolves game was that that's when Howe had Tonali switched from right side to play centre and in a deeper role, centre of his three in a deeper role, and he was magnificent against Spurs, and for the rest of the season was magnificent, and arguably our player of the year, or one of the contestants for our player of the year, and that switch had come against Wolves. Against Bournemouth, what interested me, in 4-1, I mean, it was incredible because we were just blown away by a Clivert hat trick. The thing that I found fascinating is that I was talking to a scout who I know ever so well, and whose opinion I think and respect a lot of, and he had told me prior to the game that if you're going to get any joy out of Newcastle when you play them, especially at St James's Park, your only chance is if you're fit enough and you've got good enough players to stick a high press on Newcastle. To If you leave our back 4 or 5, depending which way we play, if you leave them on the ball and drop off and mark up in midfield or a bit deeper, they will strut and walk about, especially Shaw, and ping the ball about and ping you back. But if you get after them, if you press our back 4 on the edge of our penalty area, the lack of pace between Shaw and Byrne can be exposed. They don't like people on top of them the second they get the ball. And that's what Bournemouth did. You watch Bournemouth in that game, and that is exactly what they did. They were full of energy, they were willing to close us down early on. Yes, it was just a one blip, as you rightly said, and you mark it down and you put it away in a drawer and say, "We'll forget about that." But you know what you also do, Andrew? You don't forget about it, because when it comes to the summer, it tells you that when you buy your right-sided centre half this summer to improve the squad next season, what's the first thing you look for? Pace, because Shaw and Byrne have no pace. It was exposed and wonderful in their own way individually. Shaw on the ball coming out at the back can look like Beckenbauer. Byrne is become an England player this season. Individually, they're terrific. Together, they both lack pace, and Bournemouth showed that. You put that result at the time because you can't change the players we've got. It was January, we could have done, but we knew we weren't going to. So you can't change it. So you put that result to bed and you think, I hope too many teams didn't actually see that and adopt the same style as Bournemouth did. They've got to be athletic to adopt that style, but you remember it for the summer and you make certain your right-sided centre half this summer, of all his attributes, one of the main ones has got to be pace.
Yeah, indeed. And you rightly remind me there of the Wolves or Newcastle's win over Wolves after the first leg. But I remember thinking in that one, John, actually, Newcastle were very fortunate to come out with the victory, even though it was
Sure.
3-0. I thought Wolves were quite good. And if I remember correctly, there was a couple of good saves that, was it Nick Pope that was back in net for that, maybe? But whoever was in goal had to make a good couple of
Yeah.
saves. And the scoreline didn't really do the performance of Wolves or the performance of Newcastle justice, really. So heading to that Bournemouth game, Maybe the resultant performance wasn't too much of a shock if you look back on how they performed against Wolves. Newcastle got back to winning ways with a win over Southampton. Defeat to Fulham, though, just days before the second leg of the Cup semi-final, left people a little bit concerned. Another poor outing from Newcastle at home as well. They were all right in the first half, but it was the second half where they just dropped off, and it's happened a few times last season where the two halves don't match up. We either see them very good, and then the half after they're not very good. Happened against Fulham. Goals from Jimenez and Muniz, which were both avoidable goals, saw United lose the game. And I would just remember being so angry, John, so angry about the manner that they lost that game because, as I said, both goals were avoidable. The first goal you had Jimenez allowed just to run free as a bird into the box, and it was Sancho who didn't track him, and he fires it home via, I think, a little bit of a deflection. But then Muniz is unmarked in the box. It's a ball into the box from Newcastle's right-hand side. He's unmarked, and he just heads home. And I was so angry because it's the basics not being done. And then you look ahead and you think that game against Arsenal's coming up. Were you a little bit concerned given the performance against Wolves, Bournemouth, and Fulham?
We were, Andrew, at that stage, not looking invincible at home. You know, St James's Park, the fortress, and all that, and we got it back to that at the end of the season. We had 6 successive home wins before we tripped up big style against Everton. But at that stage, we weren't invincible at home. I mean, we were 1-up at half time against Fulham and lost 2-1, and we didn't look back to our best. And of course, that was February the 1st. February the 5th is the second leg of the League Cup. And you think, look, there's been an awful long time in the meantime. We're 2-0 up by everything that's saying we've got 1 foot in Wembley now. But Geordie's been Geordie's. Us having what we've had in the past, more big disappointments and elations. You think after the Fulham, after Bournemouth, could we just trip up? Mind, we've got to triple big time because they've got to score 3 clear goals to beat us because we're 2-0 up. But thankfully, we reverted to what we did in the first leg. We won 2-0 yet again. And again, tactically, we were first class. We've been very clever on tactics. The switch to the 5, etc., down there. When we played up here, I mean, it was clever because we had Shaw come out from the back and track Declan Rice. Wherever Declan Rice went, Shaw would come out, whether he was dropping deep or whether he was going wide. Declan Rice would find Shaw snapping at his heels, and he did a terrific job on Rice, who is a wonderful player, and so much of Arsenal goes through him. And on set pieces, we were excellent because this was Arsenal at the height of the fear that caused throughout the country on their corners and set pieces because they had a lot of tall guys, a lot of movement on their set pieces. They scored a barrel load of goals from set pieces, which is the reason we put 3 big guys into the side, Botman, Shaw, and Byrne, to give us the height to combat that. And we did it excellently, and I was delighted. And that, once you beat them home and away, you thought, hey, we've got to Wembley. We're in with a real chance now.
Yeah, Newcastle were fantastic value for that victory. We had an early Alexander Isak goal ruled out for offside. Murphy then got the opening goal. We did have Martin Odegaard missing a fantastic chance for Arsenal, but it was the only time they really threatened Newcastle United. And once Murphy got that goal, there looked to be only one winner. And then they were helped by David Raya, who gave the ball away, and Newcastle United punished him for that with Anthony Gordon tapping home. But it might be lost on people, or people might have forgotten that actually Newcastle United won that game at home, having lost to Bournemouth and Fulham in succession. Arsenal had thrashed Man City 5-1 just days earlier, and Newcastle were without Joe Linton in the middle of the park. So there was a lot of things before the game had even kicked off, which leaves you concerned about how Newcastle United are going to be, especially the absence of Joe Linton. But in the end, John, none of it mattered because Newcastle just had more desire and more want, and they were just they knew what they had to do, and they had the energy and the atmosphere from the stands as well to really push them over the line. I mean, it was deafening that night.
I mean, the good thing was last season, and I hasten to add up to the Everton game on the last day, Newcastle handled big occasions brilliantly. When they were faced with the big teams where we would implode in the past and get it all wrong, Newcastle consistently rose to the occasion. They didn't on the last day of the season against Everton. That's what was so baffling. The opposition wasn't great, but the occasion was for the Champions League. But we did it there. And what we also got was master classes in terms of tactics. Eddie gets the big credit for that, and that's the way it's bound to be. Jason Tyndall comes into that as well, and we mustn't forget the role that he plays in tactics. But we were clever. We in the Shaw coming out on the Rice, and we were clever again in the cup final, which we'll get to no doubt against Liverpool. We've been clever tactically as well as rising to the occasion, which all of which, as I say, made Everton all the much more baffling. But we don't want to concentrate on that because we don't have to. Because when we wake up every morning, we're still in the Champions League.
Yeah, let Aaron Stokes worry about that in part 3 of the review. Go on, we'll put that on him. We know though when it comes to finals that momentum is absolutely key. But Newcastle in the run up to the Carabao Cup final really struggled to find that. There was a resounding 4-0 defeat to Manchester City where they were so poor, and it could have been a much higher scoreline. Again, I just remember being very angry at that performance because I felt United were better than the performance they put on. You know, it's all good getting beat by Manchester City, fair enough, but watching the performance, you think you didn't do anything. I'm not going to say they rolled over, but they're near enough dead. And you think this is a Man City on a horrendous run of form. And if you actually look at how Man City did from that game to the end of the season, they didn't really until the last few weeks of the season start to pick up form and look like the City of old to a degree, although you know they're not there just yet. But very bad performance from Newcastle and it left me quite angry. Then we faced Nottingham Forest at home, which we won 4-3, and it was a crazy game. Forest grabbing an early lead, but then totally fell apart. Newcastle were 4-1 up at half time. The second half was kind of a foot off the gas approach by Newcastle, and in the end it was a little bit nervy. That angered quite a few fans, if I remember correctly, John. Then they lost 2-0 to Liverpool. And another game, John, where you and I both said, what are Newcastle United doing here? They are better than this. Some Newcastle United fans said, oh, well, it's Liverpool. What are you expecting? And I just wanted Newcastle to give a true account of themselves. They were better than a 4-0 defeat to Man City. They were better than a 2-0 defeat to Liverpool. They are a better side than that. And I wanted them to show that. It was a game. That was the dress rehearsal to the final. No Alexander Isak. A lot of people said, well, actually, that was Eddie Howe playing a few mind games.
Two things to say about that. Well, a few things. First of all, it wasn't a dress rehearsal to the cup final, as we know only too well with hindsight. Secondly, I don't think for 1 second that not playing Isak was mind games. Isak, from this stage onwards, which is just before the League Cup final, in the League Cup final, you burst your britches regardless, but has been carrying consistently with a groin. We've known that, haven't we? And he's missed games, and he hasn't looked in the form that he was for the first 3 quarters of the season, etc., etc. He wasn't. I don't think for 1 second he was playing mind games by Isak not starting. What it did do was confirm what we know: when he doesn't start, we don't win, nor do we score, because in the 4 games he didn't start, we never scored 1 goal from open play, and we never won. What he did do clever in this game was not keeping Isaac up his sleeve, in my humble opinion, but was not showing his hand on tactics. He saw the game again. It confirmed to him the way Liverpool play. He decided that he wouldn't show his hand in this game. And possibly, by the way, Andrew, one of the reasons, the main reasons you wouldn't show your hand is because you didn't have Isaac. So if you show your hand in any case, if you haven't got your main weapon, then you can't exploit it. So it would have not worked without Isaac there to be part of it. But what he noticed, and he got confirmation by watching that game, and this is how clever he is. He noticed that Liverpool zonal marking. That's the way they don't go man for man, they go zonal marking. And often that means that you've got a small guy against a big guy. And he decided not in that game, but that when he went to Wembley, he would exploit that situation using Dan Burn and these big guys against their marking on set pieces in our favour. And that worked brilliantly. Down there, we were well beaten. Callum Wilson started, and bless him, he has been unable to go out on a blaze of glory. I did a piece in the Chronicle a little while before the end of the season saying, please, Callum, score your 50th goal in black and white. You deserve it before you leave us on freedom of contract, which is the most likely outcome and the most obvious outcome. Please get your goal. Never ever for me looked like it from this moment onwards. When he all of a sudden he was available again, having never been available early in the season. And honestly, if he didn't look the same guy physically, I wouldn't have recognised him as being Callum Wilson the way he played. He just ran about and very rarely collided with the ball. He didn't. He had one shot that I can remember all the way through from now to the end of the season, from the time we're talking about Liverpool, February the 26th to the end of the season. Just didn't. We had no shots on target at Liverpool. No shots on target. And Callum, bless him, we talked about, thank you very much, Miggy. We love you to death. We'll remember you. But his sell by date had well gone. I think the same applied to Callum. And Callum played in that game at Anfield, and we were well done.
Yep, indeed. And we wait to hear confirmation of what will happen to Callum Wilson at Newcastle United, whether it'll be a pay as you play contract or whether indeed he will leave on a free. When we hear that news, we will update you guys. We had the FA Cup, John, as well, around the same time as the games we've already talked about. Newcastle had beaten Bromley at home, just got past Birmingham City in a feisty old game down at St Andrews. I mean, that was a little bit tough for them. And then they faced Brighton, who have become a bit of their bogey side. Newcastle United not only were dumped out of the FA Cup, a bit of a poor performance from them, Anthony Gordon was also sent off and would miss the Carabao Cup Final. Again, I just remember being so angry that day, but more than anything, just being deflated as well.
You're an angry old so-and-so, aren't you? You weren't Mr. Angry on this. You weren't Mr. Angry on the Steve Wright radio show, were you? You seem to have been in a wonderful season of achievements, getting in the Champions League and winning the League Cup. You seem to have spent an awful lot of time being angry.
Well, I'm angry at certain results and performances because I don't think it shows a true account of what Newcastle United can do. And when they have done, I've been absolutely buzzing and absolutely over the moon. But that Brighton game, scrap the word angry, I was just deflated more than anything because we just seen arguably our most informed player do something so reckless and get himself sent off. And then he was dumped out of the FA Cup against the Brighton side who weren't in great form, weren't playing their strongest team. And this is all in the build-up to a cup final as well. And in the back of my mind, it's thinking, it's not really even about the FA Cup exit, really. It's about that momentum that we say is so key. And Newcastle just could not grasp it. And then you've lost arguably your most threatening player at this present time. I mean, I don't know about you, John. Maybe you were happy Anthony Gordon got sent off.
No, not at all. Good gracious me, hardly. I mean, as I say,
but not angry though. You weren't angry.
No, I was. No, I wasn't angry. I was frustrated, and there's always dips in the season, you know. I'm not talking now about what Gordon did. I'm talking about results-wise. Everybody will I'm certain Liverpool can look back and say we won the title, but it wasn't annoying that we lost that particular game. Um, and we lost some games badly this season, but recovered and went on huge runs, didn't we? We won 9 games on the trot at one stage, etc., etc., etc. What frustrated me against Brighton, apart from the obvious, which is you've lost Anthony Gordon for the cup final, that was horrendous. And I tell you what, that imploded on him more than anybody because in the end Newcastle still won, and Newcastle have managed the last part of the season when he's played a very minor role compared with what he did play. It killed him. There's no question about that. But apart from that, apart from his stupidity, what really bugged me is I felt we could win the FA Cup. When before we played Brighton in the quarters, I looked at who was left, and every big club was out of the FA Cup. Whether that be Liverpool or whoever. Major clubs, you were left with Aston Villa, who were hoping to do well. You were left with us, who were hoping to do well. You were left with Nottingham Forest, who were hoping to do well. You were left with outsiders called, Crystal Palace, who were hoping to do well. I felt we could win the FA Cup. We certainly had a better run of opponents in the FA Cup than we did in the League Cup, where we hit all the big sides in the League Cup. So I was frustrated because I thought we could have won the FA Cup. Now, what would we be saying if we won the FA Cup, the League Cup, and got in the Champions League? Goodness gracious, am I being a greedy boy? Yes, I am. But I felt we could win the FA Cup, and therefore I was absolutely decimated to lose to Brighton. But of course, with the comfort up the sleeve if you knew the League Cup final was coming.
Yeah, I think a lot of people also probably shared your thoughts on the FA Cup, that it was a winnable competition, but then you don't know how it might have affected that last few weeks and months of the season in terms of the Champions League running. I mean, it's all ifs and buts. But we then go into the game at West Ham, John, really nervous. It was the last game before the final. It was a Monday night. Liverpool in great form, Newcastle no Gordon, and then we also learned that Lewis Hall will be out for the rest of the season as well. Newcastle win the game 1-0 thanks to a Bruno goal. And I actually think that this is one of the most important results of the season. We needed that win, not only to boost our spirits going into the final, but also the confidence that I think it gave Tino Livramento and Harvey Barnes, who both came in on that left-hand side, absolutely invaluable because they came in for a lot of stick during that performance. People were thinking, oh, is Livramento really the man to replace Lewis Hall? Can Barnes really bring the goals and the assists that Gordon did? In the end, Barnes got the assist for Bruno that won Newcastle United the game. And I just felt it was the game that shook the dust off Livramento and Barnes, and it set them up nicely for the rest of the season, really, because from that West Ham game, the final included, they haven't looked back really in terms of their numbers and their performances. Livramento maybe more than Barnes as the season's progressed, but in that period, I think that West Ham game was so important to those two players who turned to be so important for Newcastle's running.
Sure, and particularly for me with Bonds, because there was question marks against Bonds. A lot of people were saying, and I was toying with the idea beforehand, before he got into the side through Gordon. Has this fella flattered the deceive at Newcastle United? Yes, he's scored goals. He can score goals, but his overall performances over 90 minutes or 45 minutes when he comes on, is it good enough? Has it been worth 40 million, the thick end of? We've got Gordon. If we've got to sacrifice a big name player in the transfer market to get people in, perhaps he is one of the people that could be sacrificed. He rose to the occasion magnificently after Gordon went out of the side, unfortunately from Anthony's point of view. Livramento, I mean, I just think he is quality. He is a Rolls Royce. Have you watched him run? I could just sit and watch him run. You could throw the football out the pitch, and I could just sit and watch him run up and down the pitch. His elegance personified, and he plays on either side with that. I mean, yes, there was going to be apprehension. Lewis Hall was in the sort of form where he could have been Player of the Year if you'd seen the season out. He was playing that well. So once he went, and we hadn't a natural left back because McTarget, I mean, we see more of Shergar and Lord Luton than we see of Target. So we hadn't a natural left back. So can Trippier go over there, which is what he did with England on a few occasions? But at 34, you're going to ask him to do that. Let him come in on his correct side, and let's see how Livramento can do out there. And he looked magnificent. I think Livramento in the second half of the season's looked as good as anybody, and he's playing on his wrong side until Everton, and then he played both full-back positions like a yo-yo. He started off left back, then he went right back, and then he went left back again. He has been terrific. He is a Rolls Royce. He is just so elegant to watch run, and with the ball at his feet, he still just runs. He doesn't sort of have to get the ball on his right foot, his correct foot, or whatever. He is quality, yes, and that did come out against West Ham, and did it come out at Wembley for both Livramento and for Harvey Barnes.
Yeah, I just remember thinking the criticism of Livramento was just totally unnecessary during that game. It was like it's his first game in that position for quite a while. He's well aware of how good Lewis Hall has been. He's also playing with Barnes in front of him. Those two now play together, so that was also going to be really difficult for him to have a man of a match performance. I'm not really sure what people were expecting, and I had full confidence that he would grow into that position. And obviously, the big test came just a few days later against Liverpool in the final. But look, he kept bowing quiet against West Ham, and then he was up against Mo Salah, and he left with Mo Salah in his pocket and a cup of final winners medal around his neck. So not a bad afternoon. Let's get on to the final then, John. Despite the lack of form and the injuries and suspensions, I just felt that this was our time. I felt Newcastle United were going to do it in the days leading up to the final. How were you feeling?
Oh, exactly the same. And I said so on our podcast. I felt we would win. I felt we'd win because I thought it was our destiny, having beaten Arsenal home and away so convincingly. Liverpool were just beginning to show a little few frayed edges. They'd had this incredible run where they'd only lost one game in the Premier League at home to Nottingham Forest. But they were just showing little frays, little bits and bobs that I thought give me encouragement. What I wasn't, so I forecast as you forecast that we would win, and it wasn't just with the heart. It was a feeling we both had as well, not just with the heart. What I wasn't expecting, and what I have reveled in, was the performance in winning it. I would have taken an 89th minute own goal for it to win and said, thank you very much. People will forget that in 20 years. They'll just see your name on the score sheet and on the honours board. But the performance was wonderful. If there is one thing that age gives you, and it doesn't give you an awful lot, apart from headaches and aching legs, the one thing it gives you is memories because you've lived long enough to see things. And that performance at Wembley, I have been around to see Newcastle win things before the Carabao Cup, which is an awful long time ago because you're talking about 69 in the 50s. And I was reporting on Newcastle in 1969, and I was watching Newcastle on my Auntie Grace's television 3 times at the beginning of the 50s when they won it. And I think this was our best performance in winning a trophy since 1951. I'll tell you why I say that. When we won the First Cup in 1969, it was a two-legged final, home and away against Uzbekistan, the best side in Europe without any question. But, in both games, we only played well for 45 minutes, Andrew, and it was enough to win. At home, in the first 45 minutes, 3-0. Away in the last 45 minutes, 2-0 down the half time. In the last 45 minutes, we scored 3 goals again in 45 minutes and win it. But in both games, over the 3 hours that we played 2 outstanding 45 minutes, which were good enough to win us a trophy. This against Liverpool was a 90-minute performance. in 52 and 55 when we won at Wembley in the FA Cup. In both those games, we played against 10 men for the bulk of the game because Arsenal and Man City suffered injuries and there was no subs in those days, so they were down to 10 men. 51 was the outstanding performance when they beat Liverpool, when they beat Stanley Matthews Blackpool. 2-0, where Jackie scored two of the goals. I mean, I was watching it through young eyes in those days, but I become a very close friend of Jackie after that and wrote a lot of books with him. And Jackie always told me that of the three sides, 51, 52, and 55, and he played in all three sides, the best side by a million miles was the 51 side. So, and that performance against Blackpool in 51 was outstanding. But I think this performance was Newcastle's best in a cup winning final since 1951, which is some accolade for the current team.
Oh, certainly is. I mean, to say that shows you just how well they performed. And they did perform so well. I mean, the whole weekend just felt different to a few years ago when we faced Manchester United down at Wembley. It felt like we belonged there, like we were the ones throwing the party as opposed to the ones who've got the invitation in the post by mistake. It felt like a lot of people had conserved their energy for the actual game. You walk up Wembley Way and it wasn't subdued, but it wasn't as lively as a couple of years ago. I think people genuinely were like, do you know what? We're going to wait until we get inside to really use our voice. And they won the battle of the terraces straight away. They were louder than the Liverpool fans. They drowned out We'll Never Walk Alone. That set the tone. And then out came the players, and we just, from the word go, you could see who wanted this more. And it was Newcastle United. Dan Burn scores with one of the best headers I think we will ever see from a player in black and white. I mean, I watched it back the other day, and that header still gets the hairs, rising on the back of my hands. I mean, it was just a tremendous header.
Can you tell me why Slot? Sorry, mate, I'm just on that header. Can you tell me
I know what you're going to ask. I know what you're going to ask here.
Manager of the year puts McAllister to mark him, who is gazing at his navel. He's so much smaller than Byrne. He's gazing at his navel. But that's what we talked about earlier on, Andrew, which is what the zonal marking, etc., which is what Eddie Howe realised at Anfield and set up for us to capitalise on. I mean, two things on the header. First of all, it was some header because it was from such a distance. It wasn't Big Dan Burn under the crossbar doing a Jack Charlton who scored a pile of goals because he was 8'6", standing under the crossbar for Leeds and just turning his head to one side and the ball was in the back of the net, standing on the keeper. This was way out. But not only was it a great header, but the delivery of the corner had to be brilliant because if it had snow on it, if it had been high, he would never have been able to produce that power from that distance. But when it was driven in, and then he could peel off the little guy who was trying to mark him and get the full bang on it, it was in the back of the net. So credit as well to the guy taking the corner. But it was beautifully executed. And, Graham Souness, who we don't adore, as manager of Newcastle United, but was one of the greatest midfielders I've seen in his time and was a midfielder in the Liverpool side that won European Cups. He sort of said before the final, never mind about Mo Salah scoring all these goals. That's wonderful, but it's also obvious, you see it. The platform for the success of Liverpool's the mid three. They win it through the midfield. And they were in the league, there's only Forest had beaten them. And that is true of their midfield. And we were talking about how good is Tonali, Bruno, and Joe Linton. They absolutely bullied the Liverpool midfield, bullied them. And I've never seen that happen to the Liverpool midfield. Unfortunately, slightly after that, we lost Joe Linton, etc., But they bullied them. It was magnificent. I mean, it was magnificent everywhere, Andrew. There was normally you get two people who'll get a 10 or a 9 mark. You'll get somebody with a 4 and 5, and etc., over a team performance. There was nobody that you were going to give a small mark to. I mean, Trippier, we'll talk about Livramento playing on the wrong side and having Mo Salah in his back pocket, and he did. and he was truly magnificent. We talk about Dan Burn getting man of the match in a header, which you've never seen. Like we talk about Isaac scoring what turned out to be the winner, which is what he did all the game. We talk about Harvey Barnes, etc., etc. But what about Trippier, 34, supposed to be finished at Newcastle, out to graze until he takes a transfer in the summer to make some dough in Saudi or wherever. All of a sudden, because of Lewis Hall, he's got to start. He's 34-year-old and he comes in and he looks like the guy we signed from Atletico Madrid. He was absolutely magnificent. They were all magnificent.
Yep, they were all heroes, and Alexander Isak gets a second in the second half. There was also a goal ruled out for offside with Bruno deemed to be interfering play. Still not sure how that one went Liverpool's way. We also had Isak forcing a good save from Keller. I mean, Newcastle United really could have been 3 or 4 up before Liverpool pulled one back in the dying moments. It made it a little bit nervous, but you know what? Even after that goal went in, there was nerves around me in the press box, and you could sense the nerves in the stands. But I was fully confident because Newcastle United played so well through the entirety of the game. When they had the ability to attack, they did it so well. When they needed to sit off and absorb, they did it so well. Every bit of their game plan had been executed perfectly. So I had no fear that when they needed to really put their backs against the wall and defend like their lives depended on it for the last 5 minutes of the game, that they would come out and do it. And we saw taking the ball in the corner, Joe Willock and Santonari, celebrating as the balls are put into touch. And they did it, John. And they got over the line. And what a day. What an achievement.
Like you, I wasn't nervous whatsoever during that period. Why should you be? I mean, the way they played throughout the game, this side, you knew, weren't going to go into a blind panic because of that one goal. They were too far in charge. They're too level-headed. They're too professional. These days, they've gone beyond. 2 years ago, when we were in the League Cup final, if we'd managed, and we got nowhere near it 2 years ago, but if we'd managed to be 2-0 up at the death and went to 2-1, we would have panicked like buggery. There's no question then from there. But this side has evolved. I mean, I just went and got another glass of white wine ordered for the final whistle. No, I wasn't afraid whatsoever. It was a consolation. I was annoyed. I wasn't angry, but I was annoyed because 2-1 was, I mean, it was never a reflection of the game. 3-0 would have been a reflection of the game. Newcastle win 3. The only thing I was a little bit annoyed about, 2-1 in the record book, looks as if it might have been close. And didn't Newcastle do well to win a close final and wasn't that great? It wasn't close whatsoever. 3-0 would have been a fair reflection of the game. 2-1 wasn't a fair reflection. But you know what? I'll take it. And I'll take that performance. That is the best all-round performance I've seen in a long time. And as I say, it was better than we did in the 1969 Fez Cup, which is saying something because that was some trophy to win home and away against Uzbek. And it was better than 52 and 55 in the FA Cup. It matched 51. And for that to be the best performance since 51 in a cup winning side is big an accolade as I can give to the current Newcastle side.
Yeah, without a doubt. Just sum up, John, the achievement that Eddie Howe has made there, winning the cup.
Oh, it is beyond any of the wildest dreams. It's beyond the wildest dreams of little lads who are 9, 10 and perhaps now think that's going to happen every year, which is what I did as a little lad in the 50s. When we won the cup, FA Cup, 3 times in 5 years, I thought we were going to do this for the rest of my life. And then I had to wait till I'm an old age pensioner to do it again. But I mean, there's a huge generation of Newcastle fans since '69 who have never seen Newcastle win a trophy at all, and now we've won this trophy, and in doing so, not only have we got rid of the albatross round the neck, have we got rid of this dead weight where we're known as the greatest authority on failure because we've never won anything, and how can we call ourselves a big club? This is outsiders elsewhere in the country. I was can we call ourselves a big club when we win nothing? All that's put to bed now. And the man that put it to bed is Eddie Howe. Yes, the players on the field, but you've got to have the right manager. And he's rightly got the freedom of the city of Newcastle. He can go and park his cows on the town moor without any feeling that he's going to get his collar felt by the constabulary. It's allowed. Well done him. What he's done for this city has been absolutely magnificent, and so is what he's done. What all the players who took part at Wembley have done for this city, and the backroom staff he's got going as well. And I guess you've got to say the people that took over the club, all of them, including the Rubens, etc., and including Amanda, who was around when the foundations went in, to everybody associated with, we all say a very grateful thank you. We'd waited far too long. I was beginning to get worried about falling off my perch before I actually saw Newcastle do something. I saw the most wonderful day at Wembley that we could have, and I am a great believer that there's many more of those to come.
Yep, fingers crossed there are. We'll just finish off on the parade that went through the city. 300,000 people came out to see Newcastle United on an open-top bus that ended up on the town moor. You had Ant Deck coming and taking part, Alan Shearer, loads of famous faces. But more than anything, it was just a sea of black and white from St James's Park all the way along past our offices here up to the town moor. Absolutely brilliant day out. You run out of words to describe what it was like and how many people were there, John.
Wonderful and not surprising at all. But I mean, yes, 300,000, fantabulous. But people, I mean, in the build-up, I mean, I got inundated with fans getting in touch with me when it was first announced what Newcastle were going to do with the celebrations, i.e., have this incredible day out on the town moor and everybody can dance for 6 hours, etc., etc. I got people saying to me, I'm coming down from Scotland in exile, Geordie. I'm coming up from the south coast. I'm flying in from the continent. Please, 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 we must have the traditional through the city. This business of going up the town moor, when it was initially suggested it was going to be ticket only and you had to be lucky when you applied that you got one, etc., etc. This was a win for all the people. It wasn't a win for the selected people or for the young people who could boogie or what. This 100, if you were 2 or 102, you deserved to take part in this. And I took up the cudgel and did say so in the paper in the Evening Chronicle. Newcastle have scored an own goal by not having a trip round town prior to going up there. And thankfully, with the not because I said it, but because the fans were saying it, and I just took up the cudgel on their behalf, they did do that. And that then guaranteed the perfect day we could get, because we had the whole lot. We had 150,000 who were in town and another 150,000 that were up on the town moor. Everybody was catered for. Everybody enjoyed it. And that day, as well as Wembley, will remain in all our memories for the rest of our lives. Not just the day at Wembley, but the homecoming day as well, because it was everything we wanted. And thank you to the club for listening to fans, because a lot of clubs don't listen, and putting right what would have been a wrong. In the end, it was marvellous, and every single person was able to enjoy it.
Very, very special memories. And there's the perfect opportunity to wrap up part 2 of our season review. John, thank you very much for popping on and providing part 2 of the season review. Me and John will be back throughout the summer as we relaunch our Let's Talk About series. So we're going to get our heads together and come up with a brilliant list to talk about every single week. We'll be coming to you on the audio only platform and YouTube as well. So fear not, we're not going anywhere this summer. Thank you for tuning in to the podcast. You know what to do by now. Hit the link in the podcast description box. Take advantage of your NordVPN offer. Hit thumbs up, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. Leave us a rating review on the audio only channel. And for myself and John, we will see you guys next week.